approval. And this first request, anybody who's got a mic open, if you could mute your mic unless you want to speak, that would be preferential. This is the Nevada Aviation Technical Advisory Committee meeting for 2022. And we haven't had a meeting since 2018. And you served as an advisory board to NDOT, who's managing grant programs and the Fund for Aviation. Periodically, we need an update in terms of advice. And in this particular meeting, we have the two previous officers, Reza Karamuz and Mike Higgins. I see them. Reza is going to conduct the meeting from the agenda. Am I right, Reza?
Yes, Kurt. Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi,
Yeah, good
Okay.
morning.
All right,
Yes.
good
hi,
morning.
Reza. It's Wendy. Could
Oh, hey,
we,
Wendy.
before we get going, could we move up the trust fund requests first so that Steve Takis is able to participate? He's got to leave about 9:30.
Sure. Okay. Yep. So,
Thank you.
yep, you're welcome. Kurt, is it okay? Should we just move on to the those budget items and then come back to public comment on all the rest?
Sure, you can.
Okay.
You're leading.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that's what we'll do. So Wendy, you're welcome to go ahead and start the discussion on that. If you want, I can share my screen, or you can with the Fund for Aviation, three different expenditure things that we're discussing here. Everyone probably has that. Do you want me to share?
Please.
Okay, you got it. So sharing the proposed expenditures from the Fund for Aviation. Everyone can see my screen. Everyone probably has maybe a copy of this. So, okay, very good. All right, Wendy, do you want to? Wendy, you're muted.
Of course.
Try again. Okay,
Oh,
I
there
just
you
have some questions. I just have some questions first on this because it's my understanding, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but the trust fund was created for grant matching for the airports, and I don't see that any of these are any airports that have requested funding, and so I'm confused as to why these are this amount of money is being requested and not being used at our airports for grant matches, which we all desperately need.
Kurt, if you would like to maybe get into a little bit about how these showed up and what the purpose is, and Wendy and everyone, we can agree not to agree on this. We can say, no, we don't want to approve any of this. So I think definitely we should discuss these. And Kurt, if you could explain each one of them. So for the group, thank you.
Sure. The first item is a grant match for an FAA grant that was awarded to the state. And it's for 22 airport pavement studies, all of which are required by you. It could be done individually by each individual airport, but I think the FAA finds it pretty expedient to give the grant to us and then have one single source managing the consultant that does all that work. So it is definitely work on each of the 22 airports or 23 airports that are in the study, and it is required for those airports. So I kind of feel like it's a valid expenditure unless the airports want to pull the grant back to themselves and manage it. It is a valid expenditure too for the NATAC funds, because it is directly related to those airports. When
Kurt,
talks-
I'm sorry. If you could give us the number, the total grant from the FAA, if we were to match it, how much is that money, the total amount?
It totals up to $386,000. This is our portion of the match, approximately. And
Okay.
still out for bids, so it could be less than that, but I think that's the maximum amount the FAA is willing to give.
Hey,
Okay.
Kurt, it's Joni Eastley in Tonopah. I have two questions. Well, actually, I have a comment and one question. My comment is that I've read several articles on the internet over the past 24-hour period that Steve Sisolak is projecting a $2 billion, that the state budget swelled by $2 billion. So I'm wondering why the state cannot afford to provide this funding. And then my second question is, my question is, it used to be in the past that wind socks and wind cones were always provided by NDOT Aviation, and there was no need for taking any money out of the Aviation Trust Fund. So I was confused about that.
Thank you, Johnny. The wind socks were also added by my directorship, or suggested that we add this budget. Obviously, there's something that go directly to the airports as well. They're pretty expensive. A lot of airports need 2 and 3 of them, so it's just kind of a lot at one time for us to pay for, apparently. And again, these monies come out of the NDOT budget, state highways. So, and then finally, the third item here was the counter program, where the state is willing to pay the subscription fee for each of the counters out at 16 airports in exchange for getting the data. So essentially, it is the sole counter program that we would have.
Mr. Chair, if I may do one other thing, and I've been a member of, well, back in 2001, I became a member of Nevada Airport Managers Association, and of course we've gone through a couple of name changes during that time. But I worked alongside with everybody else on the creation of the Aviation Trust Fund, and I think that we need to go back to the legislation that created the trust fund and talk about what the purpose was. It states very clearly in the legislation, or in the NRS, that the money was, or the fund was developed to award grants to a county, city, or other local government for obtaining matching money for federal programs and any other programs related to airports. And it doesn't say anything about the state using our money in the Aviation Trust Fund to match for grants for their projects. So I think we need to get our thinking clear on that. And if somebody could just point out to me, what am I missing in the NRS that makes it legal and allowable for NDOT to use Aviation Trust Fund money for their projects?
Thank you,
And-
Joni. NDOT
Mr. Chair,
can put these on here or propose. We don't have to agree. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay, all right, I understand that. I just want to bring everybody's focus back to what the legislation says, what the law says, and figure out how we got to this point.
and Mr. Chair, if I may, this is Mike Dickin.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, everybody. In May of 2017, as you all know, the state appropriated $100,000 for fiscal year 17, 18, and 18, 19. They appropriated that $100,000 per year to the trust fund, and the bill, Senate Bill 528, specifically states The money appropriated by subsection 1 must be used by rural airports to match money that is available from the Federal Aviation Administration. So the reality there is the last money that, other than our license plate money, which we all use these license plates to support the Aviation Trust Fund, the last actual act by the state legislature was to appropriate money to the trust fund for the use only by rural airports, not the state of Nevada. So I think this is a moot point. If we were to vote to approve this, we would be breaking the law.
Thank you for that. And, I agree. I think that, I think the state, NDOT, Aviation Department should pay for the windsocks. And I think that the tracking data, which is basically a subscription, again, that's something I think if the state wants the data from the operations at those airports, then pay for the subscription and get that. So maybe at this point, if are there comments on this subject, or maybe we can take up a vote. Other comments?
Hi, Rizza, Steve Takis.
Oh, hi, Steve. How you doing? Go ahead.
Doing good. Hey, this is not in any way a slight on the wonderful things that Kurt and NDOT Aviation do, because they do tremendous things. But when I look at the statute, it's pretty clear. NRS 494.043A says the money could only be used to match grants for cities, counties, and other local governments. The state's not considered a local government. The state is the state government. When we testified to create the Aviation Trust Fund, the testimony that we gave is we pitched them the value of being able to help, particularly the rural airports, with their 6.25% match. And so even though I think these are probably great things to do, definitely the pavement work that's done by NDOT is great. That's not an airport AIP grant, that's an NDOT grant. And the windsocks have been great. I don't know that they've ever been paid for out of the trust fund. If they have, that would be a surprise to me. And then the counter program.
Steve, they haven't. They haven't.
Okay. And the counter program, I think that's something worth discussing with NDOT to figure out where it may be needed and approach that on an airport by airport basis. We've got a great program in place at the Carson City Airport, largely thanks to our airport manager. But one of the pieces of an airport counter program usually is you need some data transmission component, which usually means internet access. And as we all know, having flown to many of the rural airports, internet access would be a wonderful thing, but it's typically a luxury that's not affordable in the really rural places. And so good ideas out here, but I don't think the NATAC can approve this. It doesn't fall within the statute. And so, while it's great to have discussions about needed things and how we can get together and help each other, I really don't believe that it could be approved.
Mr. Chair, may I address Mr. Takis?
Please. Thank you.
Hey, Steve, I recall, didn't the recent session, during a recent session of the legislature, didn't they establish a fund and they had quite a bit of money in it, as I recall, where entities could go to that fund to get grant match money?
Separate from the Aviation Trust Fund or the Fund for Aviation?
No, it was just a general. Maybe Wes Henderson would remember. I think I heard his voice on this one.
Mr. Chairman, can I address that? This
Yes,
is Wendy.
please, Wendy. Go ahead.
Joni, are you talking about the state grant match program?
Yeah, right.
And that requires you to have 50. They'll only give you 50% of it if there's any money left. And my two airports have been trying to get into that program, and it's been not successful.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to I just want to piggyback on something that Steve said. I am a huge fan of Kurt's. I just think that I'm alarmed at this, and I am not in support of using the Aviation Trust Fund for anything other than its intended use.
Thank you. And, you know, I want to echo Joni and everyone else and Steve. Kurt, thank you for everything you have done and continue to do, putting all the heliports on the map and, you know, making our sort of infrastructure stronger. But I do agree with the members that these items don't fall in line with what was in the intention of the original NRS. And to that end, I think maybe it's time to take up a vote on this.
Mr.
Either
Chair,
that or make no motion and
Yeah.
let it die.
Okay.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I believe it is appropriate that we make a motion to deny these allocations from the trust fund for use by the state.
Okay. And I agree, Mike.
And I do.
Mike, is
so.
that your motion?
That is my motion.
I will second Mike's motion.
Very well. Mike has put the motion forward to deny these, and Joni has seconded it. Okay. Wendy, you brought up this. Do you have anything else to add to this?
No, I think we just need a verbal A or nay on their motion.
Okay. Everyone
And I
who's
do
in favor.
appreciate
Right.
Kurt. I do appreciate Kurt. We have benefited from him bringing us windsocks
Right.
every now and again and all his rest of his help. So I add my thanks to that as well. But we do need an A or an I or not a nay.
Everyone who's in agreement, aye.
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 And if you oppose, let us know. I hear no opposition.
So, Mr. Chair, it's Joni and Tonopah
Yes.
again. How
Go
can
ahead,
we
Joni.
make this work for Kurt? Should it be that the individual airports apply for funding? Should we open up a grant period that specifically applies to some of these items and then have the individual airports apply and then we make the awards?
Well, Joni, each one of these three items are related to an airport. So windsocks, as an example, just to pick one, what if an airport has the funding to buy the windsocks? What if another one doesn't? So, you know, we'd have to make those discussions, I think, at a different time. But the tracking data, the sensors are there, the counters are there, but you have to have a subscription so you can get that information in and know, you know, how many operations. And that's if the aircraft coming in has ADS-B. So again, you know, how do we make that determination? I think that's something we can put as a decision to be made or a discussion to be had. We can maybe discuss it today, but I think we have a lot on the agenda today. As far as the grant goes for the engineering studies, again, it's based on the airports that are going to get that study. And that's a big grant match. So as Kurt said, $386,000 by the FAA. We don't want to turn that money away from the state. We want to be able to take advantage of that. Our match is $24,125. I agree that
I think somebody should be talking to the governor then and seeing how they can get their hands on some of that $2 billion surplus.
Well,
I think that, Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, Steve Takis, hey, have
Yes,
these
Steve.
funds been removed from NDOT's budget? Because I mean, they must have been in there before because it was done that way before.
Right. This is Wendy. Exactly right.
Kurt?
I mean,
Yeah, this is the fund for aviation. As you see on the bottom of the page there's $72,000 approximately.
no. I'm asking, are the NDOT funds that were used for the match for these grants in the past or used to pay for windsocks, has that been removed from NDOT's budget or is it in the budget for next year?
It was not specifically in the budget for this year. I was asked to place these items here to expedite their payment, but and I can go back to the directorship and ask for the money. I'm not upset in the slightest bit about doing that. And if they turn it down, though, is my problem. And if I were to have to turn back the FAA grant, that would sort of bring to an end my function here. But,
Well,
But that is a state function. That is a state planning grant for pavement maintenance. It supports all the airports, but it is part of the state's planning process. And this is a 180-degree switch in how funding has been conducted and state planning for aviation and intermodal and all the other things that NDOT is responsible for. To try and raid this fund to support a state activity is inappropriate.
I guess the other question is, has the director changed the historic position of NDOT? Is he no longer wanting to be supportive of aviation? If that's the case, then we need to go to the legislature and we need to address that issue. It's sad to hear that because it's such an important component of transportation in Nevada. But if that's where we are, we just need to know that.
I would like to say one thing. I think that the new administration coming in is going to be more friendly to our needs. I don't think we've had much support in the last few years. This showing up on our aviation fund usage is an example. I don't, Kurt, if you have anything to add to that. I know you have a meeting coming up, I think, with the new governor's team. And I think they want to hear what we need for aviation.
And Mr. Chair, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that Kurt is only doing what he was told to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's
Joni,
carrying
absolutely.
he's carrying somebody else's water on that, and
That's right.
we all realize that.
Absolutely, Kurt. I mean, that's you're the messenger here. So
Reza,
yes.
this is Ken Bowen with Nevada
Hey, Ken.
Aviation.
Yes. How you doing? Go ahead.
I feel it's appropriate to address a couple items real quick. Briefly on the grant, the state grant. I think what I heard Kurt say was that individual airports could apply for that study grant, which then in fact would make them eligible for the match from the fund.
Yes, and that's exactly what I said. Maybe that's what we need to do, is to break this down into individual projects that are appropriate for NATAC to fund, and then open up a grant period and have counties apply.
That's something that probably should be discussed with the ADO before we turn down the grant. But the broader point is that NDOT did an airport heliport system study that was concluded last year, and the report was delivered at our conference in March. That study outlined several projects to the tune of $4 to $8 billion, if I off the top of my head, that are needed at airports across the state. A broader perspective was that plan has not been presented to the State Transportation Board, as far as I know, and we have made requests to be able to present that, which will be one of our priorities going into the new administration. Also, Nevada Aviation Association has retained the services of McDonald Carano as a government affairs group to lobby for a VDR for $5 million for the Fund for Aviation. So we're going to be looking for support to help approach. And I'd like people to contact that are not members of the Nevada Aviation Association that want to be involved in this to circle back with us so we can get you dialed into that support that we're looking for, including an aviation visit to the Hill in Carson City, the legislature, on March 27th. Finally, I'd like to say that Nevada does not have a robust aviation program. In my current role, I've visited several Western states, Wyoming, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, that have a much more robust program and are funding aviation. And I think that's one of the objectives that we as this group here in NATAC, as well as Nevada Aviation Association, can do to help Kurt is develop a robust program for them. So understood that ADSB program is in place at 16 airports. Each airport individually is able to download data from 7 days in the rears and accumulate that data over time, step forward. And so we can look on expanding how that ADSB program. What's important about that is because if we don't know, we can't go to the legislature and say who's using our airports, what type of operations are ongoing there, why they should be supported. We're not going to be able to build a case around that. That is the most mountainous state in the United States. And so in order to shrink time between point A and point B, aviation is a must. So we do as a state, for the economic vitality of our communities, support of medical care, emergency response and whatnot, we need to support our airports beyond what we're doing. And I think it's evident that what's being discussed here today and the limited funds that are remaining in that trust fund, these are really crumbs compared to what is needed for supporting these projects at airports. So please, let's all get together on that page and then move this ball forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's really important. When we passed the long time ago, that initial, I think it was 2005, the $500,000 that we used for the match. I think that we do need a sustainable dollar amount ongoing. I think that 5 million that you referred to for the BDR, I think that is a good number to put on for the number we're seeking. There's so much work to be done. Just to our south, the state of Arizona funds their airports quite well, and they have more airports, a lot more airports, but each airport gets a few $100,000 a year if you sort of break it up in terms of the funding they provide for match. So yeah, we need to do that. I think that you bring up a good point, and we all should be behind this. As far as what the budget is and how much money is left in the fund right now, it's not a lot. And, we now have voted not to approve this. But I do agree on a case-by-case basis, like Joni brought up, Ken, that we should look at that and see how we can continue to keep this moving forward. We don't want to give up the funding from the FAA for this match. Somehow we need to figure out how to make that work.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Mr.
go
Chairman, this is Wendy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to one little point, and not to beat this whole thing to death, but $72,770 in the trust fund. A lot of that has come from our not a lot, but some of it has come from the license plates that we have killed ourselves twice at the legislature to go get that in. And the amount that would go to the small rural airports that need that, even if it's only $2,000, that's $2,000 that my county commissioners don't have to dig out of their budget. That's zero. So
Agreed.
Reimbursing that. So that's not an insignificant amount. And I do appreciate, I do appreciate everyone working on this. There's no reason why NDOT has to turn that grant back, because how did they fund it in the past? They've been funding it every year. How did they fund it in the past? So hopefully we can get an NDOT director in there after the first of the year that actually understands and cares about aviation, that will help Kurt out. That would be my hope.
Agreed. Are there any other comments on this item here?
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
think that in the minutes that we're about to approve, there was some discussion about prioritizing how we expend the money. And so I think from a use perspective, and again, I fully support Kurt and everything he's done. The reality is that his attempt to be Solomon and divide that money up equally among all the rural airports down to like $500 and such, perhaps NATAC needs to establish a committee to establish some sort of priority schedule that we can evaluate the true need for projects at airports and establish a priority schedule, and help Kurt by identifying that maybe everybody doesn't get a share of the pie every year, but we could fund 2 or 3 critical projects that are really necessary to the rural airports. So, I agree that we don't need to keep kicking this around, but the fact is that there is opportunities for NATAC to take a stronger position with regards to how we want to see this money expended instead of making Kurt crunch the numbers and divvy up the money.
I like that idea. I think that having a committee that gets all the information from each airport and maybe the compelling story that the airport submits, and somehow we can figure out how to prioritize in a fair way certain few airports that we can fund each year for these matching grants.
Yeah, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The FAA uses the priority schedule to determine how they expend state apportionment monies. We can do the same thing. It can be based on safety or capacity or whatever, but I think that we should not have Kurt be the only arbiter of how this money is spent, and we can help.
I agree.
Well said. I agree.
I agree.
Wonderful. So we move on to public comments at this point. If anyone has anything to add, any comments on this, you get 3 minutes.
Reason?
Yes.
This is Susan Fisher.
Oh, hey, Susan.
Susan Fisher with McDonald Corano.
Yes.
I have put in a budget request to the governor's office for $5 million for this particular account. So,
Okay.
We'll see where it goes.
Well, that's wonderful. Let's see
So
what happens.
any support from anybody else, whatever associations you're with or organization you're with, a letter to the governor would be appreciated. And I can touch base with any of you offline if you'd like.
Susan, thank you for
Susan,
that.
the current governor or the incoming governor?
Well, the way the budget is, the current governor puts together a budget, and then the incoming governor does tweaks to that budget. He'll do his own budget, but the current governor has to do the budget, and the staff is working on that now. So I have put in the request to the current governor, and I've also talked to the incoming chief of staff, who is on the other side of the wall from me here in our office, to put the bug in the ear of the incoming governor as well.
Ooh, so we could contact Ben directly also.
You could.
Okay, great.
Susan, I think what might be helpful is if maybe as a letter, kind of like a template that has all the talking points, we're all kind of speaking from the same playbook that lists out the reasons why this is so important for Nevada's aviation industry and infrastructure and all the different things we've talked about for a long time. Is that something you can provide?
Absolutely. I'll get that to you today.
Perfect, because then we can circulate that and you don't have to figure out what to write. At least some of the stuff is listed, and then you can just put on your letterhead, circulate it among your association folks or other stakeholders, and make sure also we submit it to the right person, contact information wise. Okay. All right. So no public comments other than Susan. Anyone else?
It's not working.
Okay. We move on to the next item, to vote, approve, amend, or edit the NATAC meeting that was a long time ago, pre-COVID. Any comments on those minutes?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
Easily
Everyone in
second.
favor? Very good. Everyone in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposing? Those minutes are passed.
I didn't ever see those minutes, but so if you can point me where they're supposed to be. This is Wendy. I'll go find them.
Okay. So we have the new bylaws that I hope everyone has had a chance to review. And this is our next topic.
here.
Linda's got a question.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
I would make one request, and that's to change that motion to allow for technical corrections or clerical corrections, because there are a couple in the minutes.
Oh, okay. Everyone in favor, so there's a request to change any kind of small errors that don't really change the content or the intention of the minutes, but to make those changes as necessary.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to reconsider the last item. And I'll make a new motion to allow for technical corrections to those minutes.
Okay. Anyone wants to second that motion?
I'll second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposing? That motion passes. And now we move on to the bylaws. Anyone would like to make comments on the bylaws? Anything that stood out?
No, but Mr. Chair, it would be very helpful if someone could go through and just tell us exactly what was changed.
Okay. Kurt, could you help us with that?
Sure. Oh, the primary goal, and actually Steve Pack has made the edits for removing the possibility of the consultants for voting on issues. So that was one of the primary objectives. The other is to try to get a better control on our possible quorum issues. It's great that everybody called in or came to the meeting today, but old quorum requirement for 9 members was really insufficient. What we've done is basically form a committee made up of 5 NIPIAS airports and 5 non-NIPIAS airports and or stakeholders that would essentially function more like a board to vote and would constitute a quorum if they were all in attendance. So in the new bylaws, we'll have more, a larger requirement. It's for 11 persons to be in attendance, but it's basically made up of a representative group of you, of the group as a whole. And they're well, so that's kind of a little structural change. Mainly, it was the request of our lawyers for legal reasons to have sufficient people.
Mr. Chair, I have a question about the revisions also. Kurt, and if Steve is still on the call, under Section 2 procedures, item 3, committee membership will be included of representation from, and then there's a whole list. And then it goes to the next paragraph. In addition to committee members, advisory participants, subject matter experts, and working groups in any meeting shall be open to representatives of government entities, including but not limited to. Does that mean that those groups that participate have the right to vote, or are we just allowed to listen?
So, as I read it, only the members of the committee are allowed to vote.
Okay, thank you.
This is Wendy, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Can I ask Kurt,
Please.
so is this on setting up the committee members? Is that when are you going to appoint those? When will those be elected? Is that with the bylaws, or does that require a separate agenda item?
Right. Well, my director asked that you approve the bylaws first, then she'll sign them. And they would become how we function. We're conducting this meeting under the old bylaws, just so everybody understands this.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Thank you.
Hey, Kurt, it's Joni in Tonopah. It's been so long since we've had a meeting. Can you please read the definition, the new definition of member of NATAC? Is it anybody who is a member of Nevada Aviation, or are there some more specific requirements than that?
Done here, the bylaws. 1 second, 1 second. The committee members will be made up of 10 volunteers, 5 volunteers from NIPIAS airports. That's FAA funded, and 5 volunteers from non-NIPIAS airports facility or listed agencies in section A3. Essentially stakeholders. Volunteers will be voted on at the last meeting of the year for the next calendar year.
Thank you.
That's the current, this is Wendy, that's the current bylaws that we're operating under?
So these are the new proposed bylaws. I thought that's what you was asking.
Mr. Chair, a question from Mike Dicken.
Go ahead, Mike.
Kurt, with regards to 5 NIPIAS airports or 5 non-NIPIAS and facilities or agencies, do you think that those 5 non-NIPIAS and other agencies, do you think you'll get 5 members?
Yeah, certainly if today's any indication, yes.
So, like for instance, Nevada Aviation Association, does that mean that any member of Nevada Aviation Association is eligible to serve on the committee,
Yes.
excluding consultants?
Well, I wouldn't say it that way, Mike. I wouldn't say excluding consultants. We have some pretty definite membership groups. We have corporate members. We have, is it affiliate or associate members? And we have active members who are working at and or representing airports. So that was what my question was, because I moved from representing airports and working actively with airports to the affiliate level, because I don't work for government anymore. So I wondered if I was still eligible for participation in NATAC.
Well, I think, Kurt, if you correct me if I don't have it right, I think we can participate, but in these new bylaws, if you're a consultant, you can't vote on an item.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're not, everyone can still participate. It's just how we take up the vote.
So that goes then for associate members. I am representing the county's economic development organization. So I wouldn't be eligible to vote either. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, this is Wendy, and I don't think that's right, because she's not a consultant.
Correct.
She
I don't
is
think, yeah.
an affiliate member, so she would be one of the 5 volunteers, either non-NIPIAS or from the NIPIAS. She belongs to NVAA.
Yeah.
So associate members, they're not consultants. They are
Right.
just representing aviation, and they don't get any money from us. They don't do any projects for us. They just
No
come and help
conflict
us.
of interest. Yeah, and I agree.
No,
with
none.
Yeah.
None. We are just here to encourage and further aviation related projects.
Yes. John, listed in section 3, we can add that, John. So John's talking about the Helicopter Association, and I don't see it here.
They were there. HAI,
Am I missing it?
thought they were there.
Yeah, I don't see them either.
I don't see it, but thanks for bringing that up, John. So we need to add that. Carol says what she sees on the screen is different than what was sent at the agenda. This, I believe, is, I think I've got the latest version on here. But if I don't, let me know and I can dig that one up. But I thought this was it.
I'm just comparing it. This is Carol,
Yeah,
from Humboldt County. I'm just comparing it to what was sent out to me with the invite and the agenda. And paragraph 1 is not like paragraph 1 on the screen. So I'm just,
okay.
which version are we supposed to be discussing?
Let's figure that out. What was the date of the email you're referring to that you got the attachments?
I'm gonna have to look back at the date. I don't have the email right up in front of me. It's right before the invite went out, so it would have been last week,
Okay.
something like that.
What is different on yours? What are you seeing different? And if
Okay,
anyone else
on
has
mine.
yeah.
On the one that I received in the email, in paragraph 1, number 1, committee membership is made up of the airport operator or their designee from federally funded Nevada airports and 1 representative from the agencies identified in section A3.
I think that's the old
It
one.
doesn't have anything about 5 volunteers and
Yeah,
all of that.
Yeah, that's the old one.
that's
That's the old one.
Okay, all right. Well,
Yes.
this is my first meeting, guys, so.
no worries, no worries.
Oh,
Yeah,
welcome.
Glad to have you.
Yeah,
So-
Resident ones?
on page
Oh, sorry.
3 of 5, and right near the bottom is the Helicopter Association. They're on there.
Which date is that, Kurt? On the top of your page?
I think it was,
Is this what, the one we?
I'm getting this off of the agenda
Well, the one we have in front of us is revised.
for the bylaws. Yeah. So we'll add it.
Okay.
okay, yeah, let's add
Yeah.
HAI.
No problem. It was our intention to have it there.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how we missed it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John, for bringing that up. Okay. Let's see. So we're reviewing these bylaws. We can vote to approve or amend or edit. Do we have any edits? Anything that someone would like to change on this? Any comments?
Kurt, do you support these changes?
Of the bylaws?
Yes,
Yes. So, yes.
thank you. Motion to approve.
I second the motion. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone who opposes? Okay, bylaws are passed as submitted. The next item is to nominate a new vice chairman for the next 2 years. The chairman is replaced by the then sitting vice chairman. So we would like to nominate a vice chairman. Anyone want to volunteer? Anyone to volunteer someone else?
This is Wendy. This is Wendy. I'll volunteer.
Okay.
I'd
So
like to
Wendy has,
Buddy, please.
pardon?
The nomination here.
I'd like to nominate Brian Martinez Moles to participate on the committee from Wood Rogers.
Okay. Could you put that, oh, I guess maybe you don't have it. I was going to say if you could add something to the chat so we have it in writing here.
I think, Mr. Chair, right now, we're just voting on the vice chair, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so Wendy has, go ahead.
I'll nominate Wendy Rudder since she volunteered.
Yep. And I second that. If everyone in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone who
I'm not
opposes?
clear, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I need clarification.
Okay,
So we had a nomination for somebody from Wood Rogers and also a nomination for Wendy. So what are we voting on? Both of them or Wendy, or what are we voting on?
Vice
just the
chair.
vice, just the vice chairman. This is the.
Yes, I know,
action
but
item.
I thought we had 2 nominations is what I'm saying.
I think that Ken was nominating for a committee member. He was.
Oh, I
is that
see.
correct?
Okay, thank you for the clarification. And I vote aye on
Okay.
Wendy.
Okay, thank you. Ken, am I right? I think you were.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll get to that. So yeah, so we have voted to name Wendy as the new vice chairman. We have seconded the motion, and everyone in favor, aye. I don't think we had any opposition. So Wendy is now our new vice chairman.
Thank you. I'm
Good
happy
job,
to serve.
Wendy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Wendy, for your continued support and all the things you do.
You bet. Happy to serve.
Yeah, she's amazing.
I know. I mean, all of you, everyone's been just fantastic. And together, I think that with the new initiative and maybe with the new administration, maybe with more focus on aviation, I think we can get some of these things finally moving forward. For possible, so this is item number 6, review, discuss, and vote to support recommendations for future research planning, studies, grants, and other programs undertaken by NDOT. NATAC will vote to determine special focus areas and issues that it will support and recommend to the Department of Aviation, and that it may seek the FAA IP program grants to pursue studies and projects. So let's go through this. Support for development and implementation of programs to seek grants to establish an airport operation counter program. So this was part of that budget item that we're discussing, and how we fund it and how we prioritize it. The next one, support NDOT's pursuit of FAA AIP grants to update state pavement study. So that was part of our budget. And support the NDOT's sponsorship of performing up to 3 individual airport sustainability studies in the strategic plan, or studies using the NDOT FAA AIP planning grant funds. Support NDOT's membership, association, and participation in the following organizations and activities. Now we can go through this list. We can add to it here or subtract. And HAI is on here as one of the participants. So let's go ahead.
Excuse me,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is Wendy. Could
Yeah.
you, you're on, still, I got your bylaws on the screen. I didn't see that list for some reason that you were
okay.
talking about.
Oh, okay. So that was on the agenda. I'll bring that up. Here you go, Wendy. See it now?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Absolutely. Okay, so do we want to support the development and implementation of programs that seek grants to establish airport operation counter program? And this is something that we discussed a little earlier. Obviously, we did not approve those budget items, but it was brought up that maybe we ought to look at the airports maybe on a case-by-case basis and then determine can we support some of those with some of the funding or not. Comments on items 1, 2, or 3?
Mr. Chair, Mike Dickin, with regards to item 1, I believe that, and I would fully support the state going out and establishing a process by which we establish these counters at airports where it's feasible, as someone mentioned about the internet access and other things. But again, it should be part of the state's planning process to identify operations and use at airports. So I'd fully support it if the state seeks a grant or decides to fund it on their own.
Thanks, Mike. Any other comments on item 1, 2, or 3? Wendy, you're muted.
Reza, it's Joni and Tonopah. Can we vote on these individually?
Sure. Well, any comments on item 1?
Okay, this is
Mike, was
Wendy.
that a motion?
Not at this time. I'd like to hear discussions all the way through the process.
Okay,
Well,
thank
this
you.
is Wendy, and I agree. I agree with 100% with Mike.
Okay. Any other comments on item 1? 1? 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. 1. Mike, would you like to make that into a motion?
I move that we support for the development and implementation of a program to seek grants to establish an airport operations counter program
As long as it's funded by NDOT?
through NDOT. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that motion for just a bit of additional discussion. And my question is, would the NATAC board be involved in helping to develop that strategy?
For
Or would it
clarification,
even be
Tony,
necessary?
when you say, just for my clarification, when you say, would NATAC be involved in developing the strategy?
For funding,
You mean
to obtain funding.
where the money comes from?
No, Mike, would you repeat your motion? Maybe I misunderstood your motion.
Yeah. Actually, I'm basically quoting from the agenda. I move to support the development and implementation of a program for NDOT to seek grants to establish an airport operations counter program. And if we would like, I do believe that NATAC could support Kurt in that effort in helping identify which airports could be. So I can include that in the recommendation, but I think that's further discussion. And I certainly would like to hear Kurt say yay or nay on that idea. We don't really have to get in his business if it's not necessary.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
We do have a comment in the chat. Jonathan Daniels, he asks if this counting program would count drones that may be operating out of that airport. And the answer is, I think the counter program, that this sensor, the counter counts ADS-B equipped aircraft. So if anyone wants to add to this, but I don't think it would discriminate whether if it's a manned or unmanned aircraft that has ADS-B enabled. Kurt, if you could chime in on this, please.
Sure. I think Aviation's ask here is for just support to allow us to obtain an FAA grant to do this sort of thing. That, of course, is whatever they're willing to approve as an FAA approved counter program. Right now, I think everybody knows they're in a little bit of a quagmire as to how things should be counted. Certainly we would want to count every possible piece of traffic, and that would include drones. But ultimately here, we're just applying for an FAA grant for the same project.
And I don't know if we want to limit it just to FAA grants. Why not just funding for that program as opposed to say it only has to be a grant? So NDOT could make
because I think we need the counts approved by the FAA. I think we need approved for whatever type of program that they're willing to approve.
Counts I think FAA approves are forecasts. They don't approve operational count facilities.
Well, we used to have a counter program, and it was an acoustical counter program. And those counts were used generally to report operations at facilities. So as long as whatever that is an FAA approved program, I think that's our goal.
Well, I'm not familiar with the AC that supports FAA counter, approved FAA counter program. I'm just saying in the motion, why do you want to limit it to grants? I think correctly just want to say find NDOT funding for it.
I see what where Ken is coming from in the wording, support for the development and implementation of a program to seek funds to establish an airport operations counter program versus grants. Is that correct, Ken?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, I will amend my motion to change the word grants to funding or funds. So it would say support for the development and implementation of a program to seek funding to establish an airport operations counter program.
The second approves the amendment.
Very good. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Everyone opposing?
Nay.
Okay, so we have opposition. Any comments on, I don't know who opposed.
Yes, I'd be interested in understanding what the opposition was. Maybe we're missing something.
It could be. Yeah, let's consider.
This is Bill Redgate out here at Red Owl Ranch.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
And my issue with the whole concept is not funding. The issue is the counter program. I'm quite sure that when we have an accurate and dependable counting program, we will lose rural airports. No question, no doubt. And that's all I want to prevent. You know, I realize that these days getting data is everything, but we have been self-reporting for so long that, you know, everybody kind of, we've all, well, I take that back. I've been to a lot of these rural airports, and I know that the numbers of operations are hugely inflated, operations reported are hugely inflated. And we're going to lose airports. And that's the one thing I don't want to happen. And that's my whole concern here, is not getting funding to count. It's just that when we count and get an accurate count by ADSB that we can prove, we will lose airports. That's all I'm concerned about.
Bill, thank you. That's very insightful. I want to ask Kurt to chime in on this because that's an important point.
I think it's a valid position to some degree. However, I guess our goals, since I've been here, is more is bigger, better, sort of approach to things. You know, we're trying to create an environment where it's everything that we attempt to do is justified. So I do need to establish exactly how many planes are flying there.
I guess to address Bill's concern, and it's a valid concern, we certainly don't want to lose any airports because of some study. Kurt, can we, as we say we want to support this initiative, can we, how's the selection process for which airports are going to be included in this counting program?
Of course, it's NIPIA's airports, and that might be a good suggestion here, is just put NIPIA's airport operations in the item 1.
Okay. Bill, would that address your concern?
Yes, sir, Mr. Russell, I believe it would. That's a good point, and I'm sorry I had overlooked that possibility. Please.
Well, that's the purpose.
I think we all did.
Yeah. Well, this is the kind of discussion we want and the positive outcome. So I think if we make that change to item 1, then we will have addressed Bill's concern, which was a very valid one, and we certainly don't want to go backwards in the airports we have. We don't want to shut anything down. So, Mike, would you like to amend your motion?
I'm sorry, I was distracted. So can somebody else pick up the ball there?
That's not allowed.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Joni.
No, that was Wendy.
Oh, I'm
This is
sorry.
Wendy. I'm
go ahead.
sorry. My internet cut out, so I had to call in, so I missed all of that conversation of what you're starting to want to vote on.
Oh, wow. It was the most important, probably
conversation
we had all day. That was it. We also, not knowing you were here, but we had to decide we're only going to mention it once. So it expired already. But no.
Okay.
Joni, please, I think you were going to speak up. If you could just go over it for Wendy.
Yes, it's just Wendy to amend the motion to include the language that the counter study only applies to NIPIAS airports. Because there was a concern expressed by a member that this might be a camel's nose under the tent situation where airports could actually be shut down or lose funding completely because their counts aren't high enough.
Oh, perfect. Good question. And I agree.
Yeah, it was an excellent question, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So,
Want to clarify?
go ahead.
don't think this counter program, first of all, is mandatory. Second of all, there are a couple of provisos. You have to have continual electrical power and you have to have broadband internet to use an ADSB counter. So to Bill's point, if he doesn't want to participate, he doesn't have to participate. But here's
Right.
the real issue. The real issue is there's differences in why people fund airports. One is for the benefit of the community. If you're going to have the airport support economic development or emergency medical or even routine medical clinics that doctors fly into different communities to provide clinics, you're going to want to have a sustainable airport and i.e. maintain your pavement. The fact that you have inflated your numbers that somehow justify your existence is living on a very thin line. What's the benefit of that? If NDOT builds a road, they count the cars that go on that road. And they do that so they can understand the design criteria for that facility, if I'm not mistaken, and who uses it. There's no mandatory counting in place. What it does provide, though, is when we go to the legislature and they say, hey, who's using your field? And we can say, well, gee, it gets used weekly by emergency medical or routine medical or support of BLM or fire or the state. Those are the rationale behind the airport, not the numbers of aircraft utilizing it. Because if you go to an airport that has one based aircraft, there's a support behind it. Is it private? Is it public? Is it non-NIPIUS? Is it NIPIUS? Well, we know it has to be 10 based to be NIPIUS. So the point is, it's broader than that. But the information is important. So it's voluntary and participation. It's not mandatory. And it's not saying that NDOT's going to fund it. But if they want information, they're going to want to fund it.
So
Thank you for that. That's all true.
second reason for funding an airport.
Economic development.
Do we have other comments on item number 1?
I have a comment. This is Corey Jenkins from Carson City Airport.
Go ahead.
This program doesn't look like it's necessarily targeted at operations for the benefit of the FAA, but for the benefit of the state. So the program that's implemented wouldn't necessarily need to be a FAA approved counter program if that's the intent. And also that would not impact federal funding for airports in that scenario. So it's just some additional information to add.
Kurt, would you like a comment on that?
Yeah, I think the objective 2 of the whole section is to improve the time that we spend on obtaining funds, applying for grants and doing the paperwork and going through that whole exercise is a 5-year process. And it's how you want me to spend my time is a large part of this. Is this well pursued? So, and I do think that certainly heavy traffic is all kinds of things at the FAA level for expansion and so forth. I also feel like it's a verification of the need for funding. So, good thing.
Okay. Other comments? I see a hand. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Brian Martinez from Wood Rogers. I guess I agree with what Ken was saying, kind of resonates that he has already kind of approved this language. It is a voluntary program, so if you don't want your airport to be part of, all we're doing is authorizing NDOT to seek funding and try to build the program. And if an airport chooses to not participate, that's in this. And so I would argue that perhaps we're better served to not say NIPIUS airports only, because maybe there was a non-NIPIUS airport that it would be beneficial to them to get the counts. And so we wouldn't want to exclude their ability.
That's a good point. Anyone want to comment on that? Ken,
Yeah,
you have a comment?
I do have about 3 airports that are non-NIPIUS airports trying to justify coming NIPIUS. For them, it's kind of critical.
Well, that's an important point too.
And I agree. as a voluntary program, all we're doing is authorizing the state to apply for seek funding sources to be able to do this. How it's implemented, I think, is still very much up in the air, and NATAC can volunteer to assist Kurt in identifying how that takes place, or he can handle it on his own. But all we're doing is recommending that the state seek money to do this. How it happens and why it happens is, I think, still kind of in the Ethernet right now. There's lots to figure out, and to support Kurt's planning program for the state, I think if they say it's important, then we need to support that.
Mike, I agree. I think that really all we're doing here is saying NATAC will support the development and implementation of this program to seek funds to establish a counter program. We're not saying that once those funds come in, that it's mandatory that these 12 airports install and track their, traffic. So I think we need to separate those things, because that's a different stage. Now, if the funding did come in, then we can decide, okay, how do we support the next phase? So I think maybe if we look at item 1 again, maybe we're going to amend it one more time and just not say what type of airport, leave it as it is, and instead of seek grants, call it seek funding. But otherwise, I think that all we're doing is saying we support this. We're not saying,
I agree, Reza.
we're not saying if it happens, then these 12 airports must install and track, the traffic. So I think we just really, the decision here and these items that we're discussing on section 6, we're trying to convey to NDOT what we are willing to support for NDOT to do. And item 2 says support NDOT's pursuit of FAA AIP grants. Why wouldn't we support that? So these are the kinds of things we need to formally say, yes, we support, and help direct what kind of focus the NDOT is going to have when it looks at different initiatives for aviation. So back to item 1, I think, to amend it again, I think, but I'm opening it for discussion.
5th time's the charm.
3rd time's a charm, and I think we finally are coming together on this. And Bill, I know you had an opposition as it was worded initially. How are you with just leaving it as it is and just changing the word seek grants to seek funding, but not really identifying the airports, knowing it's voluntary? You could opt out of it.
That's good, but I'm still have trepidation involved. I have seen far too many airports get tanked for very little reasons, and I just am concerned about it. But don't think, given the nature of given that I'm the only one in this camp, and that so many of our learned colleagues are far more experienced than I am with the government end of it, I think that it would be unwise of me to continue with opposition.
Thank you for that, Bill. And we just had something put in chat, which I think is another thing to consider. What if we added the word voluntary somehow into it, meaning that the airport can choose at the end whether if they want to participate?
Well, the only problem with that is then when the government comes back, you can only support seeking funds for voluntary programs. If the government comes back with a mandatory program for NIPIAS airports, which would suit what we want, then we couldn't support it theoretically. Now, mind you, supporting it is not a big, this is not the be all end all thing here. Again, these are not, killing anything right now, but yeah. So I see the point of everybody making sure that it is voluntary, and that, but I just, I don't want to keep us from going after what we want just because the granting authority says it has to be voluntary,
Okay. All right. Well, 3rd time's a charm. Mike, Joni, do you guys want somebody amend item number 1?
Well, I think we're back to kind of where we were. So I make a motion for NATAC to support for the development and implementation of a program to seek funding to establish an airport operations counter program.
So Mike, just for the sake of clarity in the minutes, you're withdrawing the motion that's on the floor and you're making a new motion, correct?
Yeah, I guess that's the case because we don't know what the
Yeah.
final motion was in the first place. So
Yeah. Okay,
we're back.
then I
back to the
I
first
will
one.
second Mike's motion.
Well, except, this is Wendy.
Okay, go ahead, Wendy.
You need to add in that the state will identify and pay for the funding. That's what you had in the first motion, that the state would pay for the funding, including the match.
No. Yeah, no, that was not part of the initial recommendation.
Well, that's what I wrote down when you said it.
But Wendy, we are going to just support the development and implementation, but we're not saying NATAC's going to approve to fund it out of the aviation fund. So two separate things.
Okay.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying because I know we were having that discussion.
Well, and honestly, if they came back and said, well, the funding we're seeking is from the trust fund, then we would say no.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we had a motion, we had a second. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposing? Very good. Motion moves forward. We go to item number 2, support NDOT's pursuit of an FAA AIP grants FAA AIP grants to update the state's pavement study at federally funded airports. Up for discussion.
For discussion purposes, I will speak both as a former airport manager and now as a consultant that works for an engineering firm. I think the state's support of pavement maintenance and a pavement planning study is critical to all of our airports. And it's a requirement of the FAA that be established. If it was on some of the rural airports to be able to fund this on their own, I think it would be a significant challenge, and that could directly impact FAA funding across Nevada. So I fully support that NDOT continue to support airports in the state through a state planning program for both utilization as well as pavement. So my position is I would fully support this for the NDOT to pursue an AIP grant for a pavement study.
Agreed. I think this is something we probably all agree on. This is important.
Is that a motion, Mike?
Not yet.
Okay.
Other comments on item 2?
Yes. Excuse me, I would like to say something. Never mind. I'll try to.
Okay. I think the echo is gone. Go ahead.
So this is Wendy, and so I understand what we said on the number 1. Number 2, once again, NDOT has paid for this whole, well, they got the grant before and have done pavement studies, and they paid the match themselves. And so that would be something that if they came back saying they wanted us to pay the match, we couldn't do that because it's not legal to do that. So I agree with them doing that. I think it is more helpful and gets done better to have them in charge of getting it all done rather than everybody else trying to fit it into some of their grants and go and try to find the match and do all those kind of things. That is very helpful, but it just shouldn't come out of our pocket.
Thank you, Wendy.
Welcome.
Other comments on item number 2? We have a comment in the chat. I run a private airport that has public use. It would be important to us for planning. Thank you. Do we have a motion to pass item number 2 as it is?
Eastly makes a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I second it. Ken.
Thank you, Ken. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposing? We move on to item number 3. Support for NDOT's sponsorship of performing up to 3 individual airport sustainability studies or studies using NDOT FAA AIP planning grant funds. Discussion on topic item number 3.
I'd like some clarification from Kurt about what exactly sustainable studies or it looks like strategic plans we're talking about.
Yeah, there were the old financial plans for airports that usually include marketing and a website, that type of thing. Basically, direct assistance, but the NATAC would be the chooser of those 3.
The NATAC would be the what?
The selector.
Oh,
You
okay.
would select,
3 airports.
right, but we're just basically pursuing an FAA grant to get the study money for that.
Kurt, this is Mike. Is that an overload on you with regards to your existing workload to add something like this to it?
Yes, of course. No, I would hope to get the FAA funding to hire a consultant. It's all good work, so.
So you would fold this into a higher level of a planning grant?
Yes, it's in our ASIP. It's in the state's ASIP, which is identical to what airports submit, but that's in our state ASIP for upcoming projects.
Other comments on item number 3? So for clarification, what we're voting on here is that we support NDOT sponsorship of up to 3 individual airport sustainability studies, and NATAC's going to have a vote on what those 3 airports are. Kurt, would we be presented, here's half a dozen airports, and then we get to choose which 3 to direct this to?
Reza, yes, and of course the airport also has to be willing to participate.
Okay.
So we will find 3 airports that are interested in having this done or need this. NATAC will approve them.
Okay.
And
are there any questions on this? Any comments?
Actually, I have another comment on that.
Okay.
And this is, I think, Kurt's comment that the state the state provides the FAA a 5-year ASIP plan, just like every airport does. I think since NATAC is intimately involved in all of these discussions, I think it would be appropriate for the state to provide NATAC with their 5-year ASIP plan, so that when we're asked to vote on approving a certain grant application or whatever, that we know where that falls into the plan for the state, as well as how the FAA evaluates every airport. So I would just ask that moving forward, that ASIP be provided to NATAC, so that when we're asked to support specific planning studies, that we know how that falls into the state's plan. But other than that, I would support NDOT sponsorship of performing up to 3 individual airport sustainability studies or studies using NDOT FAA AIP planning grant funds.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Kurt, is there anything you want to add to what Mike just said about providing us the study in advance?
No, it sounds perfect, and actually, I think it is on my NATAC webpage, part of the state's website right now, just like the previous meeting minutes, things like that, and agendas are. So we have a place for it, and it's really no problem to share that with the public.
Thanks, Kurt.
Mike, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, my motion is that the NATAC support for NDOT sponsorship of performing up to 3 individual airport sustainability studies or economic strategic plans or studies using NDOT FAA AIP planning grant funds.
Anyone want a second?
Sure, I'll second that. This is Eastley.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposing? Very good. We move on to item 4. Support NDOT's membership association and participation in the following organizations and activities. And we have a list here. If you think any of these items, any of these organizations should be deleted, or if there's others to add, please go ahead.
I have one.
I have one.
Go ahead.
In the bylaws, the Recreational Aviation Foundation is on there, and I would suggest it be on this as well.
Thank you.
Okay. We will add that. I think it should be on here.
Yeah.
Someone else had, yeah, go ahead. You raised your hand.
Yeah, I would recommend or make a motion to add the National Association of Flight Instructors to that list.
NAFI?
NAFI, yeah.
Ooh, that's
Okay.
a good one.
Yep. We will add that. Ken, you had mentioned something earlier.
Not in relation to this list.
Okay. I couldn't remember. All right. Any other organizations we want to add to this list? Everyone, do we want to make a motion at this point, or is any other discussion on this?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the amended list.
Okay, so we're adding RAF and NAFI.
Right.
Yep.
This is Wendy. I'd second that motion.
Okay, everyone in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposing? Motion is approved. Item number 7 here, discuss NATAC's legislative objectives and issues for the upcoming fiscal years, both in federal and state law. Develop working group or committee member assignments with a focus on upcoming legislative and aviation fund issues. Vote to select committee members to perform action issues identified by NATAC. So this is, we're back here shortly into the new legislative year, and we want to create some working groups and committees with specific assignments. Do we have suggestions on the what committees? Kurt, do you have some ideas, some things that maybe can help us here?
Yes. Kind of critical that when the legislature starts to meet and we are called in to answer questions or provide comment or do presentations, that probably local individuals are able to attend those meetings and physically attend them. Yeah, I'm assuming you can do most of the legislature this year by Zoom, but it's just nowhere near as effective, particularly in speaking with the legislators. And not so much in the meeting itself, but possibly in the hallway. I always put kind of strong arm the local airport managers to attend and participate in this as a sort of our primary function there. And then anyone else possibly presenting for example, Las Vegas will send Rosemary up here for a presentation on Harry Reid Airport and the county's activities, or the Reno Tahoe Airport will send in representative to do speak about the benefits of transportation. Sort of thing. Having just a group, a physical group to show up at the meetings is kind of extremely helpful. And I, as you know, am only allowed to answer questions. So a forum for us to speak about.
I remember now what I did not remember last night, period. That is that Western Union wants the original receipt for your money order if you have it, period.
Mike,
where that's coming from.
I think, Mike, if you could mute your microphone. I don't think that was related to our meeting. Thank you, Kurt. do you have other things, Kurt? Yeah, Ken.
Yeah, Reza, Nevada Aviation Association is planning a really robust legislative presence this year. There's two things that are on our radar right now. Obviously, one is the fund for aviation and appropriation for that. We're looking at asking the legislature for a one-time quote unquote appropriation, but we're doing a study to determine other sustainable funding sources so that this is not a reoccurring ask. I mean, we'd love it to be in the NDOT budget. That would be part of a robust aviation program within the Department of Transportation. And when I was airport manager, I did sit on the One Nevada Transportation Committee, the NATAC, and they had a picture of an airplane on their brochure, and they did mention airports, but that was the limit of it. So our focus is going to raise the profile of aviation and the importance to the state. The second one is we want to help support Elko with their commercial air service. Jim Foster might be able to give us an update on that, but currently their agreement with SkyWest to fly to Elko to Salt Lake is to expire at the end of the year. I know they're in some sort of negotiation with SkyWest, but we're also working with the Nevada League of Cities on the revision to the Air Service Development Committee that was established in 2019, but never funded. So one of the things is to fund an air service study. The other is to modify what the committee was supposedly going to be made up of, the Department of Tourism. We think it should be expanded to include other aviation entities and other stakeholders like Nevada Mining Association, Gaming Association, those kind of folks, as well as tourism. But broadly, I think NATAC could lend a lot of assistance to this group and our efforts. I don't know if there's anything that I've mentioned that outside of those two issues that NATAC would want to support individually. But I think that if we can get everybody together on these issues, that we'll have a lot better chance at getting those type of funds available. One of the things that we don't discuss in that fund for aviation is the non-NIPIAS airports. And I think that if we have a robust aviation program, non-NIPIAS need to be included in that. There might be grants through this fund that airports can apply for that they may not be getting an AIP grant for. Let's say, for example, it's to run a power or water to the airport or broadband internet. If we think those are important, i.e. to be able to file a flight plan at an airport that doesn't have, a telephone, for example, or the ability to contact flight service via radio or the center, that running power or broadband internet may be important. Weather reporting stations may be important, but if you're a non-NIPIAS airport, it's not going to be grant funded. Yeah. So I'm just trying to think a little broader and how that fund could benefit aviation throughout the state. So with that, I would invite you guys to get involved with us on these discussions, but I'm not trying to detract from NATAC. We're certainly a participant in that. I just wanted to let everybody know the steps that we're taking now through our government affairs approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I know that you had mentioned earlier that you guys have that March 27th event. If you could just maybe give us a little bit of a heads up on what that is and how we could support it.
I'll give you a thumbnail real quick. What we're asking our members to do is to, first of all, reach out to their legislators in their community. So there's an election that occurred, obviously, and so some of those members of the legislature have changed, so we want to make an initial contact with them. We also want to follow up with that with a visit. If we can visit them in their office, in their community, come March 27th, when you try to get an appointment with them in their office in Carson City, it's going to make a big difference. Those individual approaches are going to change. I went to the legislature in 2019, and we could not get anybody's attention about anything. But the one question I heard over and over again, well, who's using the airport? Who's using the airport? And so until we had some solid information, it was difficult to broach that subject. However, now with the Nevada Airport Heliport System Plan, that work has been done. And Kimberly Horn's product included individual airports and the needs of those airports in there. That's the foundation of our lobbying efforts, should be that system plan. Yeah. I mean, it's recent. It's accepted by NDOT, they signed for it, it's paid for by the FAA, and we should stand on that document. Clark County and Washington County participated very highly in that, where they listed out their needs individually. So it paints a broad picture of the state for aviation and airports. So I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel on that. I think we be the main stakeholder on carrying that system plan forward and saying, hey, you guys funded this, you guys approved it, now you need to support it. So I think that's our efforts.
Okay. I have one more question on March 27th. Are you holding, like we've done in previous years, and we held events at the legislative building? Are you doing something like that, or how's that effort going?
Our objective is to get to them in their offices and meet them
Okay.
face.
So
Yeah,
there's not a gathering spot. It's just going to be individually. So there's going to take some coordination to make sure, we have sort of an effort where we divide and conquer, so to speak.
I think the more people that show up is the better effort. One of my concerns about the aviation day type function that I observed is that the staffers end up coming, get lunch and leave. So I think our objective should be to have a face-to-face, you're probably going to get 10 minutes. If you have your message honed, which we're going to help develop, then you can share that information and try to sell the issue of why a robust aviation program in the state's beneficial.
Okay. Ken, have you guys developed a kind of a formatted letter, some sort of template where other folks can just take a look at?
Yes, sir. We're working on that. Our goal is to have that out first week of January.
Okay, very good. Because then again, we'll go back to those talking points and making sure that we're stressing all of us with the united voice, saying those same messages so that it starts to stick eventually.
Well, one thing the system plan included was an economic impact study. And it was aviation contributed second only to gaming in the state for economic impact. I think gaming's like 70 billion and we were like 65 billion. And gaming couldn't exist without aviation. Now, granted, most of that does come from the population centers. That's not to negate the importance of that, but the rural airports also show what the value is to that community. And that is part of those individual brochures. And so it extends beyond the number of airplanes that use it. And it just comes back to the importance of having it in your community and what it's used for.
Okay. So thank you for that. And I think it is important. And those studies are out there. We should definitely take full advantage of them. So back to item 7 here. Do we want to come up with a working group or a committee that can help address some of these things so that there's regular meetings or something to keep the ball moving? Any comments, suggestions?
I think it's very important that we continue with this. And in the bylaws that we just approved, Objective A actually says provide review, comment, and make recommendations on the statewide aviation planning process for the statewide aviation transportation system required by state statute. So in essence, NATAC is the voice of aviation for NDOT and in the state. So I think it's critical that our membership be very involved in making these in developing the recommendations that we want to carry forward. And the director of NDOT basically wants us to have the authority to make recommendations to support a state aviation system, and that should ultimately include funding. So I think that it's lining up through all of Ken's efforts and all of us that have carried this for a long, long time. But we need to take advantage of the rules and the way things are written and be able to present our case.
Thank you, Mike. I agree. Do we want to take up a vote to select a committee and the members to perform these action issues identified by NATAC?
Mr. Chair, I think that you can appoint.
Okay.
You have the authority as the chairman to appoint committees.
Well, I'd like to hear, one thing we want to make sure we're doing is if we appoint a committee or if we form a group of folks that, we have a pretty clear objective, and also we're not adding a lot of, commitments on other people's behalfs. So
Well, let's see who's interested first, maybe.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. I completely understand. I mean, it's going to take more time out of your schedule, but I mean, this is something that's very important to us. We've been working on this forever, a lot of us here, and I think it's important that we have kind of a new beginning starting in 23, and I think we've learned a lot of lessons over the years. I think we also have a lot of good information to work with. So, who's interested in being involved in this committee that can maybe help with the legislative information we've been talking about, other issues that are in this item number 7? Who would be interested in participating in a committee that we would form to address these?
Reza, Nevada Aviation will obviously be in support of that. But I want to, I want us to kind of have our efforts heading in the same direction. I mean, if there's something different than the 2 items I mentioned, then yes, we should discuss those and figure out as a committee how to move forward. But I think those 2 objectives that we talked about are similar to what NATAC already is looking at pursuing. So
okay,
obviously,
also, Reza, we've based on the new bylaws, the committee membership is supposed to include multiple organizations too. And quite frankly, I think that as the chair of NATAC, as long as you are the chair or however we do that, we should reach out to these organizations and solicit their willingness to participate, because they are big players in the state. And I think that it's critical that it's not just the airports that talk about aviation in the state and talk to the legislature. It should be these economic engines and other things that are involved, the air races, the EAA. There's a lot of groups that should be at the table and have a voice. And because the broken record of the airports begging for money has been an old, and it's gotten us very little. I think it is a new approach.
Thank you, Mike. And I agree with that. And I think what I'm hearing is maybe we postpone the creation of this committee. We take our time to reach out to the organizations and, ask for their involvement. I think having a bigger representation of different stakeholders, just not airports, other folks that are involved and contribute to the aviation ecosystem in Nevada, I think is important. I agree.
And to not lose the momentum, I suggest that you as the chair can request Kurt to establish a meeting even within the next month after we have some responses from the different organizations on their participation. I don't want to delay this, but I think being as inclusive as we can is important.
Thank you. If anyone has any other comments, I do agree, Mike. Other comments on this topic?
Yes.
Yes. Reza?
Yeah, hang on.
It's Joni in Tonopah. Many of you have heard me say this repeatedly over the last 20 years, but I believe that any effort to secure additional funding for airports should include representatives from the construction unions. They will be the biggest benefactors of us being able to move projects forward.
Thank you, Joni. And what you're saying is that we don't have them included in our list yet.
Right.
Right. So what I think maybe makes sense, Joni, is since you brought it up, if there are other sort of non-directly and related airport or aviation stakeholders, but they would be benefiting from these infrastructure improvements.
You bet they would. As soon as all of those public works projects go out to bid, they would be, one of them would ultimately be the benefactor of all that money.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Are you saying, how would we include
They
that?
should be our allies in any efforts that we put forward to get additional funding, either through the legislature or other means.
Okay. So as I'm thinking through this, what I'm kind of going back to is the talking points, like a document that we can share with other folks out there who directly benefit from all these initiatives if they were to come to fruition, and they could help us move this
Yes.
forward.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And I like that. I think that's a really important and a key point, because the more people we can get on our side and the more the messaging is repeated out there from all these different fronts. And we can also have, with Susan's help, list of legislators, and all of us also have some familiarity, but who should we be talking to, and
Reza, we should also include the Nevada Association of Counties on that list.
Okay, on the list that we just item number 6, you mean, or what, or you mean just a list for outreach?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, yeah, if you could take that and construction and some of the other things, if there's other ones, please share, because I think that's very important. Okay, so Mike, to your point on item 7, Kurt, could we have another meeting so that we could take up this after we've had some time to study which members to consider or what organizations? And
absolutely, and sure, just so you know, I have asked a couple of local airport managers to help me specifically with the legislature as they get started. So, I'm not unprotected here, but we do need to, have more of those active participants in the role up here in Carson City. So.
Okay, I agree, and thank you. So we've decided to leave item 7 for future, take it up on a different meeting, and then have a discussion and make decisions on that. We move on to item 8. Vote to approve, amend, or edit the Fund for Aviation Funding Proposal 2023 program, including state matching for pavement studies at the 22 airports. The number 2 item, the windsock purchase. Number 3 is the counter program, which those are the 3 items we saw in the budget. I think we've already voted not to approve.
Right.
So this is done. Item number 9, discuss items to be placed on NATAC's next meeting agenda.
You've also done that.
Yeah, we're kind of moving in, not exactly in sequence, but moving forward.
Yeah. So those items, Reza, those items will include basically revisiting item 7, and then Kurt will be able to can give us the state's ASIP. So that will be on not necessarily a discussion item, but for informational for NATAC's review.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And if there's anything else that we're missing for the next meeting, please feel free to chime in.
So would you have the new bylaws approved by then, and would you want to vote on committee membership?
I hope strongly that they are approved by the end of the year by my current director. So that is my goal. Forcing you all to come out to sunny day to do this. To get that done. Because as we change regimes here, I honestly have no idea what direction I'm headed. So.
Well, you might want to consider putting that on the agenda then for committee membership voting.
Yes. Selection of the committee, really. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll add that to the agenda for the next meeting, selection of the committee. So moving on to item 10, next NATAC meeting. This is an annual, it's showing next December. I would submit that maybe we want to have a meeting before that, besides the meeting that we just created for item 7. Maybe after the legislative session, maybe in June sometime. What's everyone's thoughts on that?
So I think Ken can confirm the dates, but I think our Nevada Aviation Association meeting is earlier in the spring. And that's identified as a potential meeting time
Okay.
and date also. But I don't think, I think we should be meeting at least twice a year, if not quarterly. If Kurt, if there are things that warrant our discussion and approval.
Mike, I agree with that. I'm an advocate of quarterly meetings, if only for the fact that it keeps us in touch with each other and it keeps us focused on the mission of NATAC.
And I agree with that as well. Ken, do you have dates for the conference, the annual conference yet?
March 27th through 29th at the
Okay.
El Dorado.
Okay. Well, then, do we want to have our next meeting during, and if that's okay, Ken, is there?
Yeah,
Okay,
Reza, this is Wendy.
go ahead.
Finally, I'm back. It always worked well. We always held our NATAC meetings in conjunction with our NVAA and NAMA meetings. It worked well. We got a lot of people. We had a lot of interaction. So that would be my recommendation, that let's schedule that.
Okay. And I like the idea. I think it's a good thing, especially we're in the middle of the session at that point, and maybe we can have time to kind of regroup and figure things out and still have the rest of the session left to move forward, depending on when our bill is going to be heard. Any other comments on holding our next meeting at the annual conference of NVAA?
But Reza, that's in addition to the potential of having a short meeting
Yes.
fairly soon to support Kurt, and
Yes.
item 7 needs to be advanced, right?
Yes. So to clarify, we will have another short meeting, maybe in early part of January or towards depending on whenever, maybe end of January, Kurt, whatever the timing works. That is for the item 7 decision making. We're talking about the next all hands on deck meeting of NATAC to whoever can attend, or maybe we create a virtual way to be at the annual conference.
Right, thank you. I'm comfortable with that, and I do have some support here to get started with the legislature as soon as they start their committee meetings here in the next couple of months. So.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. So we will have a meeting coming up in January sometime. Kurt will let us know when the timing is going to work. And then if everyone agrees, our next NATAC meeting will be at the annual conference. Anyone?
Sounds good.
I agree.
Okay.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Anyone want to make a motion?
It doesn't. Yeah, I would move that that NATAC conduct a meeting in January to discuss legislative activities, and the following meeting would be at the Nevada Aviation Association annual meeting in Reno.
Very good. Second?
I'll second that, Wendy.
All right. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposing? Okay. Approved. Public comment. Anyone have any comments about what we discussed today? Anything to add?
Reza, something kind of related. I could not find the agenda or the backup on the NDOT Aviation website, and when I went to the link for that the state has for all public meeting notices, it said that the site could not be found.
Well, Kurt?
Yeah, all I can say is it's on my front page. It's on the front page of the aviation.
It's on the front page of what?
The aviation section of NDOT.
Oh, okay. I never thought of looking there. I just went to your main website. Thanks, Kurt.
And a lot of historic documents, everything from this meeting and minutes and so forth are on the NATAC page of our website.
Thank you, Kurt. Any
Thank you.
questions or comments? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is Cindy. I
Okay,
just
go
want
ahead.
to make a comment about, Ken made the comment about maybe revising the legislation on our trust fund. I don't think we should go there. Specifically created for the NIPIAS, because you can't get grants from the FAA unless you're in the NIPIAS system. So maybe we can put something else, another way to help people in the NIPIAS, non-NIPIAS system. But there's a lot of hard work and a lot of really detailed information that went into putting that together with Dennis Taylor and Hal and Kay Bennett and Steve and Joni, everybody that worked on that. I don't think we should mess with what is really good. So that would be put to that if we ever decide to discuss that.
Thank you, Wendy. Ken, do you have anything you want to clarify? Okay. All right. Hearing no other public comments, that brings us to the end of the meeting. And until our next time, I adjourn the meeting.
Bye, everybody.
It was wonderful to hear your voices.
Likewise. Yeah, it was great to see everybody. It's been a long time. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rosa.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
Kurt, for putting it all together and handling all this,
Yeah, thanks,
the
Kurt.
logistics. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
We got
Finally, at the very
coming down if you